Welcome to Reclaim Australia Rally Against Terror. Today we are in Martin Place Square, Sydney, January 29th, 2017. It is my absolute pleasure to be your MC today. I'm Rosalie Cristani. I would first like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of our land. I thank God for our country, and I also pay respect to those settlers who came after. I thank you, Liz, and the entire Reclaim team. Thank you, Dan Evans, and my security detail. I want to thank the men and women who volunteered today. Thank you to the police and security forces for being here for our protection. And thank you to the media and the opposition, whose presence makes this issue more important to be heard. One day, you will join us on our side. Thank you for coming across the country today. You have people here from right across every state. Thank you for inviting us to your state. We have an illustrious list of speakers today who are pioneers in their own right. They are John Bolton, Dr. David Adler, Scott Morland, Dan Evans, Peter Vasiliou, and on behalf of Dr. Daniel Nalaya and Nick Folks. We now are going to sing our Australian national anthem. Are you ready? Yes! You have to do this without music. Okay? Australians all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. With golden sun and wealth return, our home is kept by sea. Our land abounds in grace, our beauty rich and rare. In history's page every state, our chance Australia fled. In joyful strains let us sing, and dance Australia fair.
And we're on! Okay, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. His name is John Bolton. John is a barrister and solicitor, a political activist and commentator, and makes submissions to federal, state and local government. John works on improving child protection, domestic violence, firearms law, and the right to self-defence, freedom of speech, Aboriginal equity, and preventing the Islamisation of Australia. His blog page is John Bolton Independent Observer. His Facebook page is called John Bolton Australian Law First. John openly states that he is anti-Islam but does not support any campaign against the ordinary Australian who lives within our laws and who also identifies as Muslim. He supports closing the gap specifically for the remote Aboriginal communities, but he opposes dividing Australians by the proposed racist changes to the Australian Constitution. He expresses zero tolerance for those who place Sharia law above Australian laws. Thank you. John's baseline is the paramountcy in Australia of Australia's civil and criminal law. John attended the first Reclaim rally in Adelaide and has attended and spoken at more than 25 Reclaim, Pegida, Australia First, council meetings and mosque opposition meetings and rallies in all but one Australian state. We look forward to John speaking at our first Reclaim Sydney rally today. I had the absolute pleasure of being at the Melton rally with John. We actually had to walk the gauntlet and we were threatened to be closed down. We were told there would be bombing and terror violence, but we both pressed forward. Him and many others showed fearlessness as we pressed on and actually held the rally. Please may you welcome an educated, well-versed speaker, Mr. John Bolton.
It is good to be anti-Islam. We don't want Islamic barbarity in Australia. Islam is a monoculture. It's hate-filled, it's bigoted, it's anti-women, it's sexist, it's anti-children, it's anti-freedom, and it is obnoxious to Australian civil and criminal law. I say this to Islamists: Australia will never be your country. Australia will never be an Islamic country. Every rational thinking person in Australia should vilify, insult Islam every day, 5 times a day if you have the time. Who made up the rule that I'm not allowed to criticise or vilify Islamic ideology in Australia? I didn't make up that rule. It is my right to judge Islam. It is your right to speak freely. It is our right to resist Islam in Australia. We do not want Islamic barbarity here. Not all cultures are the same, and in fact, Australian culture is better than Islamic culture. Australian rule of law is better than Islamic Sharia law. Equality of the sexes is better. Protection of minorities is better. Some things about Australian culture are just not negotiable. Free speech is not negotiable. The right to criticise Islam is not negotiable. I claim my Australian constitutional right to speak freely at this political rally, even if some people think that they're going to be hurt or offended. We have to be frank and honest in our political dialogue. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to say things that some other people may not want to hear. This is our country. Australians have nowhere else to go. We have no place to run to. This is our home. Reclaim Australia is a dangerous group of people to our politicians, because we can think things out for ourselves without regard to political correctness. Australia, our nation, was not given to us. It has taken centuries of hard work to build up. And it is a great country. Number 2 in the world on the United Nations Human Development Index. Our culture, our society, our nation was not given to us, and we are not going to give it away. We have a duty to hold on to it and pass it on to our children, not to people who want to change us by terrorising us and committing murder on our streets. Australia is a country which not anyone in the world can come to, and that's a good thing. The democracies of 21st century Europe, in this 21st century, have the brutal fist of 7th century Islam, a 1400-year-old ideology, pounding down on Europeans' right to speak. Because their leaders, their politicians, opened the floodgates to a tidal wave of Islamic terror into Europe. Australian politicians who seek votes from Islamists need to be voted out. We have to show our politicians that appeasement of Islam is a vote loser. Islamic apology for terrorism is a vote loser. Being a dhimmi, an Islamic useful idiot, is a vote loser. There is no place in Australia for Sharia law. Islamists have a law that says it's okay to hit your wife. There's no place in Australia for a law like that. Islamists say it's okay to clitorectomise and butcher the private parts of little girls. There's no room for a law like that in Australia. They say it's okay to force a 6-year-old to get married and a 53-year-old man to have sex with a 9-year-old. There is no room for a law like that here in Australia. They think it's okay to give a 15-year-old boy a gun in a mosque at Parramatta to go out and shoot people. There's no room in Australia for people who even think like that. Already the Islamists are saying to our government, to the federal government inquiry, they're saying that Sharia law can live in Australia so long as Sharia is dominant. They want Section 18C to make it unlawful to even criticise Islam. It's nearly time for me to swear about that.
Go on! We want you there!
Since 2005, our government has been seeking advice on how to respond to the threat of homegrown terrorism. I say it's not homegrown if it's the firstborn children of Islamic immigrants. This is imported terrorism, not homegrown. The Australian government's review of Australia's counter-terrorism machinery now identifies that it is whole families, whole Islamic families in Australia are terrorists, and I quote from that report. There is now an intergenerational dimension with the families of known terrorists increasingly radicalised and involved. End quote. Whole families are now Islamic terrorists in Australia. That is not homegrown, it is imported terrorism, and they do exactly what they like. The National Children and Youth Law Centre identified 250 child marriages in just 12 months, and how many prosecutions have we had? The Victorian Women and Immigration Refugee Coalition sees 150 young Islamic women and girls a week who are seeking advice how to escape forced marriages here in Australia. And we've had one prosecution. Our leaders are failing us. These obnoxious things are taught and preached in mosques. Mosques are a threat to our national security. Councils, local governments and shires are not protecting us. I want the federal government to take over, using the defence power, to take over the regulation of mosques in Australia. There must be prohibited activities. There must be no preaching of violent acts of jihad, no encouragement of terrorism, no promotion of financial support, no sedition by teaching the overthrow of Australian government by terrorist Islamic jihad. All jihadis that want to leave Australia, let them go, but they must never come back. With female genital mutilation, I want the law changed. If your little girl, your 4-year-old, turns up at one of our 2 genital mutilation reversal clinics, as the mum and dad, you should be charged. It's your responsibility. You should have to prove you're innocent, not the other way around. I refuse to use the Arabic word for face masks. Right now in Europe, children are going to be forced to learn to speak Arabic to make immigrants feel welcome. In Australia, you can never fit in if you do not speak Australian English, and we can't see your face. I say ban Islamic face masks. I want more anti-terrorism powers so that our squads can do random searches of mosques. When they had to phone up the Parramatta Mosque after that murder and ask permission to search, this is madness. When was the last time a bikie gang got a telephone call asking for permission to search? I want an Islamic schools watchdog. There must be random searches of Islamic schools to make sure that they are not teaching Sharia, not teaching boys they're superior to girls, not teaching girls that they have to have their faces covered. Random search and Islamic school watchdog.
And less funding, more for the public.
They keep doing what they like. We've had 23 arrests in 9 months for jihadi acts in our own street. 600 people, so-called Australians, went overseas to fight. They must not be allowed back into our country. How can our authorities track so many people? Do not let them back in, government. If the rate of Islamification of Australia continues for the next 40 years the way that it has in the last 40 years, then we will reach 20% Islam in 40 years' time. Now, we know what happens in countries where there is 20% Islam. Sweden is now the rape capital of the world thanks to Islamic immigration. We do not want that here. I say stop Islamic immigration until those who are here obey our laws. The Quran and the Hadith are based on the life of Muhammad. He was a terrorist, a warlord, a pedophile, a sexist, a misogynist, a barbarian. We need to stand firm against that. There is no room for that in Australia. We want to preserve Australia for our children and our grandchildren, and it's okay to say Australian culture is better than Islamic culture because, as a matter of fact, that is true. When people say to me, you're anti-Islam, I go, well done, Sherlock. That's true. I am anti-Islam, but I'm not anti-Aussie Muslim. Those who have been here for a couple of 100 years, part of the furniture, put Australian law first and a Muslim second. I'm not against them at all. I'm against these Islamic jihadis who bring their barbarity and their murderous culture to us and try to terrorise us into their way of life. If you come to Australia, you have to fit in with us, not the other way around. Our leaders are failing us right now. 250 child marriages, 1 prosecution, shows leadership failure. 2 clinics in Australia, 1 in Sydney, 1 in Melbourne, to reverse female genital mutilation, and just 1 prosecution. Leadership failure. We say yes to freedom, no to Islamic tyranny. We don't want to end up like Germany, France, England, Norway and Sweden. I'm exercising my political right to free speech here in Australia. It's protected by the Constitution. I think I have a right to ridicule someone who tells a 15-year-old boy to go out and shoot somebody and you'll get 72 virgins and go to heaven if you die in the process. I ridicule that. I say, fuck your feelings, fuck you. Thanks for having me.
Another round of applause, John Bolton! Wow, he doesn't mince words. These are educated people, speakers we've got here today. The next
Tune in tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Bye for now.